questions. Ask your questions when the slide comes up. I will be monitoring chat and Q&A, so I can stop Jen and have her answer it then instead of having to go back, because sometimes that's confusing. And with that, Jen, welcome, and we will get started. You'll let me know when I need to move forward.
Yeah, and if you're on and heard Virginia talk about it, the next couple slides are going to overwhelm you a little bit, but don't worry about it, because there's tons of stuff on here that even as a Google specialist, I don't use, and it's okay. We're not going to use all these products, but we'll go through some of the biggest ones. So if you want to go to the next slide, Virginia. I'll just go through a quick agenda here. So we're going to look at all the Google products, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into Google Workspace, Gmail, associated with the calendar and tasks. We'll go through Drive, Docs, Sheets, Slides, Alerts, which I highly recommend if you're not using those. Great way to keep up to date on things. Meet, Maps, YouTube, and then we'll end out with some pretty big business related ones: Ads, Analytics, Data Studio, Search Console, and Business Profile. You want to go to the next slide? Here is slide one of, I think I have three.
You have three.
All the Google products. And actually, these are not actually all the Google products. These are going to be all Google products these are considered, the first two slides are for everyone. The next slide is the business. There's actually developer slides and even more that I did not include because those are very specific. But these are some of the Google products that are available to everyone, whether you are a business professional, a student, or things like that. And each one has their own thing. We're going to go through a couple of these, but it's a combination of like online products and in some cases, physical products. For instance, Cardboard is a virtual reality set, for instance. So it's a combination of an online, but also has an actual physical product to it as well. If you go to the next slide. Again, more of what we consider the more Google products available to anyone, business or personal, for instance. And if we go to the next one, so there's 4 slides, I forgot. These are the remaining of all of the personal and business available for everyone. And then if you go to the next slide, this will be the slide for that they have dubbed as specifically for business or professional use. That's not to say that some things can't be used even for personal. However, in some cases, some of these are going to come with a little bit of a cost or are bundled into a what they consider, used to be called G Suite. It's now called Workspace, Google's products. Okay, so why don't we jump into Workspace? Again, this used to be called G Suite. It considers itself the productivity and collaboration tool for all the ways we work. It is very similar to Office 365. If you're familiar with Microsoft's model, you can now buy a subscription and you get access to Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and actually a ton of their products as well. And this is kind of Google's answer to this. So they offer it Gmail. Don't think of it as gmail.com, of having a Gmail address, but you can actually use your business domain through their system. It just comes in through the Gmail interface, for instance. And then Calendar, Google Drive, their answer to OneDrive, Google Meet, which is their answer to Zoom, for instance. And then Docs, Sheets, and Slides are answer to Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And then they also have Chat, which works within the Gmail interface, for instance, so that you can chat with your coworkers or anybody else that you bring into the system. So this used to be called G Suite, is now called Workspace. There is a cost to this. I think the lowest is $6.99 for a user, for instance. But obviously, as either your business grows or the number of users or the functionality you're looking for, the price does go up. The one thing I would say is always, talk to a technical specialist like Virginia on what's better for you, Office 365 or the Workspace, because each one has a little bit different functionality and security and things like that, and things that you need specifically for your business. So there's probably instances where Workspace works fine, but there might be instances where Office 365 is more appropriate for your business. All right, next slide, Virginia. And then, like I said, Gmail and calendar and actually tasks come into this as well. So again, Gmail, if you have a Gmail address, you know what this looks like. It's just the normal Gmail interface. However, you can set up your own business email with your domain to come into Gmail and work within that interface. You can actually connect multiple emails into one account, for instance. So if you wanted, for instance, your personal email and your business email to come into the same account, you could do that. You've also got calendar function, very much like Outlook or another system that you might be using, where it has the calendar, it's connected, it'll automatically find appointments from emails, put them on your calendar, for instance. And then the other thing is that this calendar can be synced with other calendars. It can be shared with others, for instance. You can sync your personal or your professional calendar with maybe your family's home Gmail calendar, so that the whole family can look at everybody's schedule at once, for instance. So pretty intuitive. A lot of people, because they use a Gmail address for their personal, this just became kind of a normal thing for them to come into versus going into Outlook or something. Again, there are certain things within Gmail versus Outlook and security, archiving, and those types of things. So again, I would, if you're looking at this from your business perspective, I would look for your IT person, somebody like Virginia, to maybe, go through your needs, wants, and what's going to work best for you. Next slide. Okay, and then Drive, which includes Docs, Sheets, and Slides, which again is Google's answer to Microsoft's OneDrive, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. So, and just like in Microsoft, if you're using OneDrive, you can collaborate, share those documents, work on them together, add comments to each other, add tasks to each other, for instance, on these. And Docs, Sheets, and Slide have very similar function to Microsoft. I think I have found a couple things within Sheets, for instance, that I was able to do in Excel, but I couldn't do in Sheets, but they're usually much more sophisticated formulas and things like that. And I know that Microsoft has the capability to do some macros as well, that Google Sheets, for instance, can do some of it, but not all of it. So if you are an expert user in something like Excel, Google Sheets may not do everything you need it to do. But if you are just a basic user, this might be an option. The other thing too that I would say here is, if you are a user of Docs or Sheets or Slides, more so on, or if you're a user, of Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, they have a little bit more design templates to work from. It's just been around longer. With the Google Suite, or the Workspace, I should say, where this comes in, it has options, and you can see on the screenshot, like you can make a pretty chart and stuff like that. It's a little bit clunkier than Word, Excel, or PowerPoint. So just something, and it's different. So if you're very used to Microsoft, this is a little bit different, fewer options. It requires what they consider plugins, for instance, where Word, Excel, and PowerPoint is just kind of part of the package. So just one thing to mention, that again, really extensive expert use, data merging and things like that, not so much here in the Google Workspace as much as Microsoft. And then some of the pretty it up type things, not as many options that Microsoft provides.
So Jen, I would also pipe in and say that if you're considering moving to Workspace, with your Gmail, you get all of these things and you can test it with a Gmail account and see if it does the functionality you want long before you jump in.
Yes, absolutely. All right, alerts. Now, this is one of my favorite things. And if you're not using it, just do a Google search for Google Alerts. It's very simple. And I just used an example here, is what do you want to monitor the web for? So if you get up every morning and you look for certain things, for instance, I put in COVID, what's going on with COVID these days, right? Because it's all over the place. So instead of having to search every morning or going to a particular website and looking, I can actually create an alert by simply putting in something that I'm looking for. This one was as simple as COVID, but you can get a little bit more creative, for instance, and then it kind of shows you the preview. So I did this yesterday, and looks like as of the 13th, there was a new epidemiological update on COVID-19, for instance, that came out by the World Health Organization on July 13th. So this would have shown up in my email box had I set up this alert the day before. Anything new is going to come to me directly. So people have used this for monitoring their business, monitoring the industry, monitoring things like COVID, and you can get creative on this. Like you could say something like COVID restriction Chicago, so that if there's something that new that comes up and maybe you haven't been able to watch the news or get alerts or look for this, do we have to go back to wearing masks? Something like that may show up in your alert depending on your search. So it's a way to just keep up in the world on the things that are important to you or your business without having to go out and search it every single day. And you can create more than one. You can create multiple ones. And there's other options too, like you can have this do daily, weekly, for instance. And then I think you can also, if you start to get things that you're not interested in, for instance, as part of that alert, you can make some changes so that it won't show you certain things as well. So I highly recommend this if there are things that you're very interested in, whether it's business or personal.
I would also make a suggestion here that if you don't want all of the alerts coming into your regular Gmail account, you can create a secondary Gmail account that you pull all your alerts into, and then you can just go there and follow up on all the things you're looking at, as opposed to them getting lost in your regular email account. It's just, if you have 5 or 6 or 8 terms you're looking at for your business, that creates a lot of emails coming in. Though Jen says you can make them come once a day, but it keeps them out of your regular box.
Yep. All right, and then there is Meet, formerly known as Google Meet. You'll notice that sometimes Google is starting to change some of these names where they're actually dropping the word Google from it. So this is Google's version of Zoom. It uses a browser. There's no need for a secondary app to download, for instance. And that's the case for Zoom. That's the case for Teams as well. But this one very specifically is browser-based. It works best in Chrome. No surprise that it works best in Google's browser, for instance. It has very similar functionality to Zoom. You can share screen. You can chat, obviously mute video, I'm trying to think, and make comments. I think you can do remote control on it as well. For instance, you can have control of others, so you can mute others, for instance, if you're the host and things like that. Google Meet was actually around, has been around for quite some time. Google didn't really promote it as much as we were all still getting used to video. Zoom came out as a secondary option, but obviously with COVID, this is extended. You can technically set up a Google Meet whether you have Workspace or not. There is some limitations on the free version, just like there is in Zoom, for instance. But again, it's a pretty good option. I would say, in my experience, the larger the group, the worse that it is, in the sense that it lags a little bit, for instance, by using the browser versus if you're using like the full Zoom application. So that's the one thing I will say that can do. And it doesn't have as many functionalities with like video backgrounds and things like that. You're more limited than you are with a fully function paid copy of Zoom, for instance. Next slide. And then Maps, again, formerly known as Google Maps. So I'm sure everybody's used Google Maps to figure out how to get somewhere, maybe do a search of restaurants nearby if you're out somewhere. But there's a whole business side of Google Maps that does a ton of things. I've only kind of scratched the surface here with this screenshot, but it can help with things with like logistics. What's the fastest route to something? And that can be in real time, in the sense of like traffic and things like that. So if you're in a downtown big city, for instance, and you need something to get somewhere, it will show you just very much like directions and stuff, but it's a little bit more specific to business. It can display your location on your website, so you can actually pull Google Maps in if you want to do, we're located here, and then they can click and see more of the map, for instance, things like that. It can also do like asset tracking. So if you have employees or something that are out with either cars, laptops, cell phones, or things like that, it also can tell you where they're at in, if they're making a service call or something like that. And then there's tons of other things as well. And there's certain things that, whether you're retail, financial services, real estate, for instance, that can help you. It can display a bunch of visual data. It can also simplify address entry. So if you've ever been to a site where you've, particularly think of restaurants, when you're ordering for delivery and you've got to put your address in, and you put in a few numbers and it automatically starts to populate, that is the simplify address entry. So there's a lot of things for businesses with Google Maps beyond just being listed on it and people using it for directions to your location, for instance, but it's very specific to industry and things like that. Okay. YouTube. Okay. It sounds like, people are like, well, YouTube is just videos and, influencers and things like that. And yes, it is, but I will tell you that 70% of shoppers will buy from our brand that they have seen on YouTube. So it's a free place to post videos and engage with potential customers, as well as potentially have some fun as well. What I always suggest, if you're going to have a YouTube channel, is that you have one for your business and you have one personally. Don't intermix the two, unless there is something in your personal that relates to your business. But again, if you ever accidentally post something personally that maybe you didn't want your customers to know, leaving that separate is always a good idea. But again, YouTube is actually the #2 search engine after Google. A lot of people use it not only to figure out how to do things, maybe see a product review, all those types of things. There is endless potential on YouTube. So it's not just watch funny videos all day. And that's probably kind of how it started. But now it really is its own search engine and a way to influence customers to your brand, to your products, to your services as well. And there's opportunities to do advertising on it, which I'll talk about in a little bit with Google Ads. Next slide. So Google AdSense. So this is actually where you can sign up for Google's ad network and you can display advertising on your own site in order to make money. So you're paid for impressions and then clicks. So if you have a lot of traffic to your website, like the example here is a recipe site, and
Shocking.
What?
Shocking.
Yes. Yes. If you've ever been to a recipe site, you will see tons of ads.
Yes.
And that's exactly what it is. It's Google AdSense. They signed up for the network. People can display ads on their websites as part of the Google Display Network through Google Ads. And the site receives compensation. It is, I will tell you, pennies for impressions and maybe nickels and dimes for clicks, depending on your site, the amount of traffic you have. So a site that gets 1,000 visits a month is paid one level. A site that gets 1 million visits a month is paid another level. But it is a way to make some money from your website. Now, the one thing I will say is that not always the ads are in, like this baking site can have an ad for a gun safe, for instance. So it's not always a one-for-one that if I'm baking a recipes, then it's always about food related. It's whatever people put out in the Google Display Network and say that they want to be wherever you're bucketed, for instance, as far as a category and audience. So if your audience is attracting women who bake, for instance, there are advertisers that believe that women who bake might also like yoga. So you might have yoga ads and things like that. So it just depends. It's all about what the advertiser thinks and how your site has been, what they see the audience is like.
Isn't this always where we get really, it's creepy because it's something you looked at 2 days ago and Google is now coming into these ads.
Yes,
Right?
exactly. That is the remarketing sense of it, is that these are sites that, yeah, will pick up those remarketing ads. So if you looked at a product or something 2 days ago, then all of a sudden you will see that brand, that product, for instance, in ads everywhere. And that's
Yep.
the remarketing part of it. Yep. All right, let's talk about Google Ads. And this is actually where you can advertise. So you're displaying ads to potential customers for your product or your services. This example here is a text ad. The example on the page before was display. You can also do video. If you have a mobile app, you can advertise for that, for downloads. And then there's also shopping, where it's an image of the product, the title, and the price, for instance, through a shopping feed. So Google Ads mission is to be relevant. So they want high quality, they want a combination of high quality keywords, high quality ads, and high quality landing pages, for instance, so that they're serving the best to their searchers. It's always been Google's model, both from a perspective of organic search results as well as paid. The nice thing about Google Ads is it's people searching for you when you're using those text ads. You're actually going after keywords that you believe that your customers will be searching for. So it's people kind of raising their hand and saying, I want this product, I want this service, show me what you got. So it does have a really high not conversion rate, but it has a higher propensity to bring in actual clients, for instance. So in comparison to something like a billboard or a newspaper ad, which is a little bit harder to track and things like that, all of this is trackable. The other thing is that you're not buying into something. So a billboard, you have to commit the whole month, maybe even 3 months, and pay that fee up front. Google Ads, if you want to have Google Ads on today, you can have it. If you want it off tomorrow, you can have it off tomorrow. If you start with 500 and you decide to up that to 1,000 as far as your budget, great. If you want to bring it down to 250, you can do that. It's completely customizable every minute, every second of the day. And then the other thing I will say is that Google has gotten really, really smart. They're using machine learning and artificial intelligence to help marketers actually do this better. They're actually using signals in real time when people are searching to serve the best that it can to that searcher, which is making it a little bit more, even more relevant and more effective as well. Okay, next slide. And then Google Tag Manager. So if you've ever done any type of advertising, if you've ever used the Facebook pixel, Google Analytics, all of these are considered pixels or tags that need to go on your site so that it's collecting information. Google Tag Manager, basically you put one set of code on your site and then you never have to upload another pixel to your site. So you don't disrupt your site. What you do is you publish it through Google's interface and add pixels there. The nice thing is that this is also grown so that it is intuitive. So if you need to add the Facebook pixel, there's actually a template for it. You usually just have to enter in one line item versus deal with code, for instance. So this is just a good way to add all of those pixels to your site without having to ever disrupt your site, without ever having to do another plugin on your site to put in this code. And in some cases, not even deal with code. If you've ever used Google Tag Manager, you put the code on once, and then if you need to put on Google Analytics, you're actually just putting in your account number through Google Tag Manager. So it's a lot easier to do in the long run, and then you never have to worry about your site being down as you publish new pixels as well. And next slide. All right, Google Analytics. So this is the data from our website visitors. It tells us lots of information. Where do visitors come from? What are they doing on the site? We can use this data to understand our customers and then potentially even make improvements on our site. So if we have a 100% bounce rate on a page, we know there's potentially something wrong with that page. the thing to note here is that the current Google Analytics, which is called Universal Analytics, will actually be sunsetted next year, July 2023. So you have to move to Google Analytics 4 basically in a year. You can run them concurrently right now so that you're gathering data, because no data will transfer from the Universal to Google Analytics 4. So you can put the Google Analytics 4 code in your site along with the existing and run them continuously over the next year until the move is. The one thing I will say, and even for me, Google Analytics 4 is a big learning curve. And marketers like myself have been fighting this because it's just not as intuitive as the former Google Analytics, how it's been for, a good 10, 15 years. It has some really cool stuff, I will admit that, but it's really hard to go from Universal to Google Analytics 4 because it's just completely different. It's a different interface. It's different, not so much measurements, but just attribution and things. I feel like in Universal Analytics, it's 1 or 2 clicks to get to what you look at. In Google Analytics 4, it's like 4 or 5. But the good news is that there's a lot more data that comes with it and a lot more analysis that can be done. But if you were just looking to see how many page visits did I get, and what's the bounce rate and where did they come from, that was 1 or 2 steps in current, and it's probably 3 to 4, maybe even more in the new Google Analytics. So big learning curve. I'm still struggling with it in the sense of trying to figure out the best way to approach this and get the reports that people need that we're used to and may not be as easy to get to, or even in some cases may not even be available. So just be prepared for that over the next year. And obviously we'll be talking about it more in the next coming months. All right, and next slide. So Data Studio. This is a great way to create a dashboard. Think of it almost like Excel. To some degree, it has charts, it has tables and things like that. It can be customized from multiple sources, things like Google Ads, analytics, but also Facebook ads, Bing ads, LinkedIn ads, all those things. You can actually connect Google Sheets, Excel docs. There's actually hundreds of connections available. So if you have data in a CRM system, that might be able to come in, and there are report templates available as well. So you don't always have to start from scratch, but you can start with just a blank template. And basically, I mean, think of it as something as simple as, you just want to know how many visitors were at your website yesterday, what was your Google ad spend, what was your conversion rate. You can create a really quick and easy dashboard, basically pulling in those top metrics and be able to look at that, every morning, first thing, and know how you did yesterday. So it's a great way to just get that high level, but it can also go into any details that you want as well. Like I said, there's report templates available. I highly suggest using them if you want to look into this, because it is a little bit, it's great. It's got a lot to it, but sometimes that can be a little overwhelming. So starting with the report templates is usually a good way to start.
So if you're deciding what to do, Jen, in terms of configuring your new Analytics 4 dashboard or putting everything in here so it's simpler for you, do you have an answer for that now?
Actually, no, because if you are using Data Studio with Universal Analytics right now, it's most likely going to break when it goes to Google Analytics 4 because they're not necessarily the same fields and everything. Some of those fields may not be as accessible either. So it is one of those things where there's going to be a learning curve into what and how you can see this in Data Studio from Google Analytics 4 as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah. If I could call Google, I would, and tell them not to go to Google Analytics.
You don't have a direct line, Jen?
I don't.
So disappointed.
No. And then we have Google Search Console. So this is your organic data. It's actually the only place you are going to see what keywords you rank for and what drives traffic. So example here, just, the clicks and stuff. But if we got into the details, I could tell you what keywords, what their average, where they ranked from 1 to 100, for instance, how many impressions they had, what their click-through rate is. That information is not available in analytics, hasn't been for quite some time, quite a few years, for instance. So Search Console is the only way to see that. And it actually will tell you recommendations on improving your SEO. That can be your page speed. It will tell you if you're missing page titles, meta descriptions. It will also tell you what your backlinks look like, if they're good, if they're junk, those types of things. So there's lots of good organic SEO information within Google Search Console as well. And then finally, business profile, which used to be Google My Business. This shows on the right side of the Google results, usually when somebody searches your brand. What you see there on the screenshot is basically what it will show. It's a quick and easy way for consumers to learn about your location, for instance, your hours, how to contact them, maybe your phone, the phone number, for instance. And if you're open or closed, it also shows photos or anything else that you post to it. This is evolving. Google kind of left this alone for quite some time, but now they just updated it. You can't use the Google My Business app anymore. It's now come over to where you've got the desktop version, but it's more integrated with maps and things like that. So I feel like Google is putting a little bit more emphasis on this, particularly for local businesses, which I think is great. But I still think there's more to come as to where they're going to go with it, for instance. But you can get insights into, because people can call, get directions. You can get insights in your business profile account to see how many people called you directly from this listing, how many people requested directions and things like that. And then of course you can post updates to it. If you have a sale, if you just want to say hello to people, you can post pictures to entice people to see more about your store, your location, whatever it is. It really is intended for more foot traffic. That's not to say that businesses that are either more B2B or maybe don't have a location, it can't use it, but it's definitely to drive foot traffic, to get people into your store or your location, more so than anything. And that, I believe, is the last slide. Yep.
Everyone's been quiet this morning, but there was a lot of information there, Jen, just a huge amount.
Yes, and know that I only scratched the surface.
Right. Do you want me to go back to the slide that had the business stuff on it? So if they have questions, they have a reminder?
Sure.
Okay, so I would love to have questions if you guys can put some in. I am going to go back. Hang on, let's see if I can move this here. I think it was the third slide, wasn't it, of items?
It was the fourth slide. So this one. Oh, wait, go back one. Yeah, go forward one. Yeah, this is all the business ones.
So you've all been quiet this morning. Maybe it's because it's Friday morning and we all need another cup of coffee, or I don't know. The deal is that you put yourself on the web, but if you ignore all the things that Google has here, you're really sticking your head in the sand. It doesn't mean you need to do all of them, but you need to know what's going on online, and Google can help you with that. We have a question. In using Google Business to boost my local SEO, you can post information to clients. How can I share this to YouTube and other platforms?
Yeah, there's really no way to share it. It really is, you have to post it in each individual place, for instance. So I can't think of anything that's—
So they would have to use a social media manager.
Right, to be able to post out to everything instead of going to each individual platform.
Hootsuite, Mav Social, I mean, there's a bunch of them. Those are the two we use, and be careful of getting the free version because it says posted by whoever that is. You want it to be posted by you. But if you then you can create that content in that management system and tweak it towards each platform and then post it. But sharing from one to another doesn't necessarily work.
Right. Okay, pixels. So in order to measure traffic or things people do on your website. So if you have an e-commerce website, that would be like, purchases, transactions, for instance. So depending on what advertising you're using or other things that you're using, you want to know this information. So for instance, the basics is Google Analytics. That is a line of code, or actually a couple lines of code, that would go on your website to capture information on the website visitor, which page they landed on, what purchases they made, those types of things. As you start to do more and more, whether it's advertising or using other things, for instance, CRM systems generally will use a pixel to let you know that somebody has visited your site. So a CRM system, if you've got your leads or your customers in a database within the customer management system, and they come to visit your site, and you have that CRM system's pixel on your site, it can tell you that this customer came to your site that day. So it's basically lines of code from different places: analytics, your CRM, Facebook, LinkedIn, if you're doing any other, even Bing advertising, those types of things, so that you know what's happening on your website, and measuring your success is particularly if you're doing advertising. So all of these are lines of code. And I just listed like 5 of them. So that would have to be 5 different pixels that you would have to put lines of code on your site, which one way down your site. It also could mean that you have to do certain plugins, or, like WordPress uses plugins, for instance. So if you want the Facebook pixel on your site, you need to install the Facebook plugin. Instead of doing that, you can do this through Google Tag Manager. So Google Tag Manager, you get one set of code that you put on the site, and then all of the pixels go in through the Google interface, and it actually publishes out to your website. So there's no taking down your website. There's no installing new things. There's no weighing it down with line of code after line of code for the pixels. And generally, it's easier to do it in Tag Manager because they've done different things. So you're not actually dealing with full lines of code, which can be difficult. If you copy and paste it wrong, or you put it in the wrong space, it cannot work. So for instance, Google Analytics, I think it's like 5 lines of code that you have to put on your website, and you have to put it like before the head tag, which is usually confusing to people. So where if you do Google Tag Manager, you literally just put in the account number into Tag Manager and then publish that, and it automatically starts doing everything that you need to do. So it's more like a couple button clicks and you're done, versus actually having to like get into your site, deal with HTML or JavaScript.
Okay, well, we're waiting for another question. I would like to talk about Google Chrome for a minute, because it does a lot for you. You can put plugins into your Google Chrome. You can also sign up to sync your Google Chrome. So I use many devices, but if I sign into Google Chrome, it then brings up everything that I have saved and I work with in Google Chrome. So let's say I'm out of town, I don't have my laptop. If I bring up Chrome and sign into my Chrome, all my stuff is there, which includes my LastPass, which I have in there, and all the places that I go most often to do all my work. And then I sign out. You have to remember, sign out. You don't want to leave yourself signed in somewhere. It's very helpful to me. So Chrome can do a lot for you. I see no more questions. Okay, this is great information, Jen. Next month, on the 19th of August, oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying August.
Right.
We're going to talk about the Google Business Profile. So the person who asked that question, for first question, we are going to do a deeper dive into my profile and what you can do with that. So thank you all for coming today. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. Jen, you were full of information as usual. And if anyone else has questions, please, you can email me, Virginia at Weiskopf Consulting, or Jen at Weiskopf Consulting. And oh no, you got a thank you there.
Oh, okay.
We really appreciate you spending a half hour with us this morning, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.